This is David Robinson, and this is the greatest Spur of all time. And I'll tell you why in this video. Because if it wasn't for David Robinson, there's a really good chance we wouldn't even have a Spurs team. And I'm watching as the Spurs make this run to the finals again. Whether they win it or not, they're going to start winning some championships. Any analyst will tell you that this team is built for that. I'm seeing a new generation of Spurs fans, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And I'm making this video in hopes that this new generation will gain an appreciation for the root of this culture and the root of this team and what it really does mean to this city. And a lot of that has to do with David Robinson. Now, it wasn't just him alone. There were a lot of players involved, but David Robinson is a big piece of that. So first of all, let's talk about the Spurs organization, where it comes from. The Spurs were an ABA team back in the day. They were the Dallas Chaparrals. So Red McCombs buys the team and he moves them to San Antonio. Well, later on, he sold the team. So the team was actually owned by a guy named Moroso, and the coach of the team at that time was Bob Weiss when David Robinson was drafted. So let's talk about that draft pick real quick. David Robinson had an unorthodox path to the NBA. He didn't even play high school basketball till his senior year, and that's only because he had a growth spurt when he shot up to like 6'6", and the high school coach sees him and tells him, like, hey, you should try out for the basketball team. He joins the basketball team. He doesn't go to a D1 school like Duke or North Carolina. He goes to the Naval Academy because his father was from the Naval Academy. So when the Spurs drafted him, they drafted him out of the Naval Academy. That was I don't know if that's ever been done before or since. So you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any other NBA players come from the Naval Academy. So you got to understand. Let me lay some groundwork for you here of the temperature of the NBA at this time. So the Spurs draft David Robinson. He's a center out of the Naval Academy. In the 80s and the early 90s, it was all about the bigs on your team. It was all about the centers and the power forwards. So they're pretty much anchoring their whole team on this piece right here from the get-go. But it wasn't just a gamble on their part. Remember, this is a big-driven league. The bigs were the ones that demanded all the money and all the attention. David Robinson gambled just as much on the Spurs as the Spurs gambled on him because he signed a 10-year contract. They both made a major commitment to each other. At any point in his career, you got to remember San Antonio is a really small market. At any point in his career, he could demand to go to New York or Los Angeles or something like that. They pick him up in a heartbeat. But if he's not that good, it's going to be hard for the Spurs to replace him. And not only that, at this point, if he's not any good, the Spurs are moving to another city. Any historian will tell you that because we just weren't filling up that stadium. There was no reason for them to stay in San Antonio. And Red McCombs had already proved that he was willing to move a team because he moved them from Dallas. So in 1988, he buys the Spurs back with the agreement with the city that if the city and the fans support the team, he'll keep them here. David Robinson wins Rookie of the Year in 1989, his rookie season. He goes on to win the MVP in 95. He won the Defensive Player of the Year award, I want to say like 94. I could be wrong on that. He was a scoring champion one year. He led the league at blocks one year, 10-time All-Star, and 2-time NBA champion. But the Spurs had a good run before they even started winning those championships. And that's when I became a fan, when he came into the league. And that's when I got excited. And you could just feel it in the city. The whole city was starting to just build an excitement and get a pride for our team and what they meant for our city. But let's look at David Robinson's career. And this is what I really want to dig into for y'all that don't know who David Robinson was to the city. Now, we've gotten into the gamble that the city made on him. And we got into the gamble that he made on the city. But let's look at who he was as a player. The one critique of David Robinson his whole career was that he was too soft. And in hindsight, now that I look at it and I keep saying life is a paradox, it was never that he was soft. It's just basketball wasn't that important to him. And this is the paradox of that. And you're going to see it in the Spurs culture and the Spurs way that we talk about. That's what Greg Popovich always preached to the players. That's how he got them to buy into the system. He got them to buy into the system by first teaching them that it wasn't all about basketball and it wasn't all about winning. And the paradox of that was, the byproduct of that was they began winning because they bought into being good human beings first, good players first. When David Robinson, when Tim Duncan came into the league, and Tim Duncan will say this himself, one of the things that kept him here was David Robinson. Tim Duncan could have always left and went to a bigger market. But because David Robinson had no ego and he was willing to step aside and embrace Tim Duncan instead of being competing with him or being threatened by him, Tim Duncan was able to develop into the player that he became for the Spurs. And then later on, when they draft Tony Parker, they got Manu Ginobili. These are all unorthodox picks. Manu Ginobili was the second to last pick in the second round of the draft, almost the last NBA pick that year. Tony Parker was one of the last picks in the in the first round of the draft, coming out of France. Both these dudes are unknown coming to the Spurs, and before you know it, we see that Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan era of the Big Three make that dynamic run, 19 straight playoffs, 5 championships. But all of this is predicated with David Robinson, with what he contributed to the city, the gamble he took on the city, and the selflessness that he had in the city. And I remember when I was younger, I hated him for that. I was a David Robinson fan, but I remember being mad because they were saying these things about him. Matter of fact, a little side story on this. Shaquille O'Neal is from San Antonio. He played for Cole High School. He was a high school player in the beginning of David Robinson's career. And when he was an NBA player, he always competed hard against David Robinson. He tried to build this rivalry, and he would talk trash about David Robinson. He said because when he was in high school, he went to the Spurs locker room, and David Robinson snubbed him. David Robinson always said he didn't remember doing that. And it really went against his character. Well, later on, after Shaquille O'Neal retired from the NBA, he wrote a book. And in his book, he admitted he lied about that story. He said he had to make up that story about David Robinson because David Robinson was such a nice guy. In order to compete against him, he had to make up a story in his head about David Robinson so he could hate the guy enough to play against him. And I always thought that was just a really funny story. Shaquille O'Neal laughs about it to this day, give him a hard time about it to this day. But that's a testament to what a good man David Robinson was. And not only that, the NBA, I want to say, named an award after him because he donated so much money to charity. He built the Carver Academy over here on the east side of San Antonio. And he's not even from the city. He's just constantly been given to the city. If you see him walking around, he's just the nicest guy. And like I said, as I see these new Spurs fans, and I include my daughters in that, I'm watching my daughters become Spurs fans, and that's really special to me to see them get as emotional over these games as I do. And a lot of that has to do with the Spurs culture, this new team that they have, Wemby. And this new generation is going to remember Wemby, Castle, Fox, and Harper. And I don't know how long they'll be able to keep this team together. Let's enjoy it while we have it. But for all these new Spurs fans coming into the fold, I just really wanted y'all to understand who David Robinson was and what he means to the city and what he means to this team. And a lot of what we appreciate now are because of the sacrifices and the selflessness that this dude had. So that's my story about David Robinson. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope y'all have a new appreciation for him. I'm going to leave y'all with some highlights of him playing. Thank y'all again for watching this video, and y'all have a good day.
And hopefully a quarter-ending lead. It's Sidney Green. In and out, Robinson. He ran lightly during the shoot-around, really didn't take part in the drills that everybody else did. David Robinson all the way.
Not there in traffic. Here comes Jordan. Robinson back. And he got the block. Horace Grant into the middle. Jordan. Cartwright, the second rejection victim of Robinson. Right into the hands of Robinson. David all the way. Anderson with a 4-on-1 to the end of it. Robinson did not want to throw that one. Anderson bails him out. Now the jam by David Robinson.